The Babylon story is a dream given form. The dream is of this man, J. Michael Straczynski, and the form is a 5-year series. And it's Thursday. You know what that means? It's time for us to have another Throwback Thursday. And we're gonna go back in time, throw up that celebration, because Heart of the Stories we tell, and me, Rob the host, is going to take us back to a quick nostalgic look and see how a story was that might be a little bit on the older side. So celebrate your week almost being over as we look at Babylon 5 Season 1 Signs and Portraits. Let's start right off the bat with. So once again, it's stop. Spoiler time. So Babylon 5 was 5 years of great storytelling. J. Michael Straczynski pitched it as a 5-year arc and might actually be the reason we have Deep Space Nine on the Star Trek front. But it was something different than what we knew. And it was one of the first stories I really got into that made me sit there and go, wow. And made me actually think about the different ways we tell stories.
And so it begins.
It's your classic space opera and sci-fi. It's a little softer than most because they don't actually explain most of the technology, but that's okay. And what made me make this the first is that we actually have some brand new stuff moving because of Babylon 5, including a new streaming service. Now, the author himself is still a prolific author. He writes comic books, does TV shows, and originally was doing cartoons too. So JMS would definitely be one of those people that we could even do a whole series on itself. But to jump right into this story, let's start by setting it up with the setting. And like most good space opera, the setting is space. Specifically, it's the dawn of the third age of mankind. And you know what? It's basically a sci-fi world where humans are not the most advanced, nor are they allied with the most advanced races. Let me let them tell you.
It was the dawn of the third age of mankind, 10 years after the Earth-Minbari War. The Babylon Project was a dream given form. Its goal, to prevent another war by creating a place where humans and aliens could work out their differences peacefully. It's a port of call, home away from home for diplomats, hustlers, entrepreneurs, and wanderers. Humans and aliens wrapped in 2,500,000 tons of spinning metal, all alone in the night. It can be a dangerous place, but it's our last best hope for peace. This is the story of the last of the Babylon stations. The year is 2258. The name of the place is Babylon 5.
The spinning station is to simulate gravity, because we don't have artificial gravity. The jump gates are alien technology that we've adapted and learned and back engineered. But in all reality, we're not the big players. But we did just come off 2 big victories in a war. At least, we think so. And that's part of the whole plot. And the whole thing is that humans are trying to build something like a giant UN in space. The setting is Babylon 5, that United Nations building. Of course, there's more to it than that, but you should definitely watch it if you haven't already. Because one of the strongest things is its characters. And we'll start with the human characters. Earth Force Alliance Commander Jeffrey Sinclair. He's really the main character. He's the one who narrated that opening. He has a lot going for him. He is both the military head of the station and the regional governor. It's a lot like the way things were back in olden days, where one military leader was also in charge of the city, in this case, the station, and he has a lot on his plate. Besides keeping the station running, technically, and keeping everything in line militarily, he's also an ambassador. His job is part of the UN thing to represent the Earth Force, which is the entirety of the human race. Well, now, he also has some interesting history. See, he was a pilot during the battle against the Minbari, and he has some missing time because he blacked out during a fight. In fact, the most important fight, one we flash back to regularly, the Battle of the Line. He also has some interesting history in that he's done just about everything. He was raised as a Jesuit in a Christian school, and then pushed on to work and then join the military. He's far from the only character we have, though. because his second in command in CNC is Susan Ivanova. She didn't get to see much action because she sat out the war before she was able to join the Earth Force. Her older brother died during the Battle of the Line that Jeffrey was so important in. And she's Russian. They make a big deal of the fact that nationality still matters, even in this sci-fi future. She has a much colder disposition than the commander of the station, and throughout the years she comes to be one of the more important characters overall through the arc. However, right off the bat, she's no nonsense and is the one that you go to when anything is going wrong. She's Sinclair's right hand and at the same time a cool pilot in and of herself. She's not the only Earth Force personnel, though, we need to cover, because up next is the head of security, Michael Garibaldi. Down on his luck since he was booted out of several jobs because of a drinking problem, Michael Garibaldi was pretty much going nowhere, until his friend Jeffrey Sinclair from the Mars riots got assigned Babylon 5 and asked for him to be put here as head of security. They call him a ground pounder, because unlike the other two that we've met, he's not a pilot. He was more like a Marine. He was infantry. And now, head of security, his job is to keep tabs on everyone. He is probably one of the most important members of the command staff because he interacts with everyone. And it's kind of cool to see just like a cop going about his business. He often gets paired with Dr. Franklin, a doctor who's willing to put all on the line for his patients. He has the unique history of he burned his notes on Minbari's physiology rather than let them be used during the Earth-Minbari War, and as such spent several years in jail. Now, the other interesting part is that his father is General Franklin. And you see, it's just amazing that this guy that came from a no-nonsense, almost boot camp-like thing became a pretty much pacifist. Not entirely, but he definitely takes the do no harm to the nth. Now, there's also a lot of supporting cast members that are human. The only one I want to touch on is Sinclair's girlfriend, because that will be important later when we talk about books. Let's move on to some aliens. We will start with Babylon 5's co-sponsor, the Minbari. Now, the Minbari are the race that we went to war with, but also the race that's helping us build Babylon 5. The important part here is Ambassador Delenn isn't just an ambassador. Almost right away we keep getting hit with she has some sort of title named Satai, and there's a big mystery that will play out, and she's obviously very important. The Minbari are much older of a race than most of the others. They're split into three castes, worker, warrior, and religious, and one of the most important things about the way the Minbari work is that they still have a whole council instead of like a president or a senate. They just have this council of representatives. They're an old race, one that knows a lot more about what's going on in the galaxy than most of the others on this council. And she, with Jeffrey, picks up as part of the Babylon 5 ruling council. Two of the other members, though, we have to talk about together. Jakar and Londo, Londo and Jakar. Boy, did these two go through a lot. Over the course of the run, you will fall in love with both of these characters. You will hate both of these characters at different points. But let's break down into the two. Jakar is the Narn ambassador, third member on that council that rules, and the Narn play a pretty antagonistic role in the early season. The entire thing is that they're a lizard-like race that were put under the boot of the Centauri long ago, and as such fought for their freedom and now are very warmongery. They sell weapons to everyone from pirates to terrorists to Earth Force. They have better technology than Earth for the most part, but not as good as the Minbari. And Jakar himself goes through a lot of changes. Throughout most of Season 1, though, he does some vile shit. We'll catch up with him in Season 2 and talk about some of the things that happen. But his partner in crime, Londo Mollari. You're going to feel sorry for him when you first meet him. In fact, you're going to feel sorry for him a lot over the years, especially in Seasons 1 and 5. But the thing is the Centauri Republic was once this great empire. I see it a lot like England. You know, the sun never sets on the British Isles. Well, it did for them. They've been kicked off Narn, they've lost a lot of their holding, and Malari himself once wanted to be emperor, once wanted to be this big thing. But you know what? He got assigned here because it was a joke and no one wanted it. And that's just exactly where he starts off. He's a gambler, he's a drunk, he's a womanizer, and at the end of the day, he knows he's a joke. He's a person well past his prime who just wants to be given some respect that he just can't. And that is going to be his downfall. However, his personal attaché, Veer, will play an important part later, so I want to talk about him for a second now. He is the perfect encapsulation of the Centauri good parts, and as such, plays very well off Malari, who often has the less than better angels on his shoulder. And then we come to the final member of the council, the enigmatic Kosh.
How will this end?
In fire.
The Vorlons are an old race, a powerful race. The only people they seem to have any respect for is the Minbari, and they're also very enigmatic. No one knows what they're like, or even what they look like. That's an encounter suit. And you see, the best part is people don't think they need the encounter suit. Those flashing lights you see when he talks, that might be really him. No one quite understands him throughout all of Season 1, and most of what he says is enigmatic. And then we have Morden. How do you describe Morden? He's a dark, corrupting force that shows up halfway through the season. He asks each of the ambassadors, "What do you want?" Kosh flips out and tells him never to ask him that again. Jakar says something, but it's too short-sighted. Delenn doesn't want anything to do with him. Sinclair doesn't get it. But Malari makes the biggest mistake of his life. With a few exceptional flashbacks, the plot is straightforward. Each year is a book, each year is a season. Like I said, it's a UN in space, a port of call. And like I said, it's a pretty complicated one. You definitely should check it out and watch it in order. Watch all 5 seasons, well, at least 1 through 4, in order. But let's talk about whose point of view this is through. Individual episodes may vary, but for the most part, Commander Sinclair and Chief of Security Garibaldi are our point of view characters. We follow the 2 of them around most of the time, and yes, we do have scenes with individual ambassadors, and everyone gets their own spotlight, but really, especially Season 1 is mostly the Sinclair show. We learn mysteries as he does, because there's a hole in his mind. Let's talk about theme and symbolism. I spent a whole episode of my show talking about the question of who are you, and that is definitely one of the big ones. In fact, the 3 questions they ask repeatedly on the show. Who are you? Why are you here? What do you want? You could build a whole philosophy just around Babylon 5's thought process on that, and that's not even counting everything about the soul that they do. But that's really a series overall. For this, we have a whole thing about memory. Season 1 is very much about what happens if someone takes a memory from you. And it gets touched on again and again throughout the series. But the fact that Sinclair has a hole in his mind, someone has robbed him of some of his memories. And then there's transhumanism. An idea that gets visited again and again throughout the series is that you can become one with machines, that machines can be bioorganic, that you can grow a ship. These are all great things. And let's not forget the most important, that human beings are not yet finished evolving.
Jason, I have become. In memory of love, I give you a gift. The only gift I have to give. Goodbye, Commander.
realize, of course, my superiors will believe none of this.
Yes. Especially since in about an hour we'll have a small accident in data storage that'll erase the file you just saw.
So what do you suggest?
Something close to the truth.
And all of this wrapped up in a giant floating tube that's a UN in space. The idea of peace coming from interactivity and coming together of cultures. And then there's the play on exactly who the hero and villain is. Not too long ago I talked about a post-Game of Thrones world where heroes weren't always heroes and villains weren't always villains, and they switched around. But these two did it first. These two did it very well, too, because it wasn't quite so grotesque. Now, this is where I would normally do the good, the bad, and the ugly. But you know what? There is no ugly, and the only bad part is the fact that it didn't catch on as well as some other sci-fi. Season 1, Signs and Portraits, ends with a bunch of cool moments, including us starting to figure out mysteries. But I'm going to leave this to you. You should watch it, leave me some comments, let me know what you thought of the series, especially the first season. And if you want us to do a second season of this, like and share. For now, we're going to go to slightly smaller stories for the next throwback. And then we'll come back and do Season 2. Overall, my rating for this, though, is that Season 1 was solid gold. And overall, all 5 years, was platinum. That's right, this is a platinum series we're doing. Because I truly love this show. It's Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones in space, but with a PG rating. Every episode was both important and well written. But I think that if you're only going to pick and choose, you really need to watch Episode 2, Soul Hunter, Episode 3, Born to Purple, and then skip ahead to Episode 5, Parliament of Dreams, Episode 6, Mind War. Then you could skip all the way to Episode 9 for Deathwalker. And then probably actually Signs and Portraits, Episode 13, that actually names the season, is the most important. That's where Londo makes his deal with Morden. After that, you could probably skip a bunch of them and come into Legacies, and then A Voice in the Wilderness, Part 1 and 2, which is very important. It introduces the idea of what's on the planet beneath them. Then the two most important, Babylon Squared, where we see that there is another Babylon station, Babylon 4, and Chrysalis, which is the season finale. The big push at the end of this season is all about setting up one of the major arcs. There's a conspiracy in Earth Force, and they've killed the president of Earth. And this assassination plays a big role for the rest of the series. Like I said, Babylon Squared, where Babylon 4 jumped forward in time and they evacuate people, and we find out that Sinclair, the commander, is something called the One, but this one's not the One. We'll touch on that in Season 3. All of it is very important, but Chrysalis ends with Ambassador Delenn entering a Chrysalis and it being the end of the year. And that is the single most important thing going into Season 2. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and as always, I'd like to build this community up, so we've reached the point where I need to ask you to like and share this video, and subscribe to the channel. And of course, let me know what you think. Are there any other stories you want me to flash back to for Flashback Thursdays? If so, drop me a line and let me know. In the meantime, I hope that you have a good day. The week's almost over. Tomorrow's Friday, so TGIF, and I'll see you next week for another Throwback Thursday. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this look through the heart of the stories we tell.